Hey guys, it's Hayes with CheatSheetPros.com. Today is Friday, October 7th, and I wanted to walk through the college prize picks and take a look at how I use the cheat sheet to look at some lines and find some. I didn't have time to do a big article this week, but I've got a few that I was flipping through here and that I do like. So when you open up the college prize picks video, we have our main tab where you can look at everything on a per game basis, the schedule, and then the prize picks tab, and then we have a stats tab so you can go look at the individual stats. I built this for same game parlays because that's the majority of what I play as opposed to price picks, but I know a lot of people don't have that availability to them. So today we're going to take a look at price picks. So when you look at this, I don't have the teams color coded just because there's over 130 and it's just exhausting to try to put that together. But we have our pass yards, we have our game spreads, we have our per game average and the line. So these are the two we're comparing. You can also see the projection, but like I said in the video last week, we don't really like the projections for most of the players. You can see some of them are just kind of idiotic. So we are going to compare the prize pick line versus the per game average. This is going to show the gap. If it's greater than a certain number, honestly, I don't remember what the number is, then it will pop up an over under. And those are kind of how I start looking at games. So we have pass yards, rush yards, and then over here we have receiving yards on the end. So when we're looking at pass yards, I flip down through here and I want to go look at the game logs of everybody. So here's the first one that pops up. He's averaging 278 a game, and his line is 217. Well, I can look and say, okay, he's going up against Michigan. That's a tough matchup, so I'm not even going to look at that one. This one pops up as an under, but you can see his projection is 0, so we're going to go right past that one. CJ Stroud, he's another one. He's averaging 275 a game. His line is 330. And he's projected for 419, so that might be one you take a look at. I don't like betting unders. I only look at overs. On a same game parlay, you can get Stroud in there and knock it down, but we're not going to mess with that one. So one of the ones that pops up to me, I see here that this is one I would want to look at. So we have Frank Harris for UTSA. Line 6.5, so fairly close. It's inside of a touchdown. A total of 73, so that is a massive amount of points. He's averaging 344.8 yards per game, and his over-under for passing yards is 295. So he's averaging 49.3 yards more. So that's the first guy that I want to go take a look at. And you can go anywhere to take a look at individual player logs. This is RotoWire, but you can go to RotoWire, ESPN, CBS Sportsline. I mean, there's hundreds of sites out there. So I'm just familiar with RotoWire, so that's the one that I use. So we're going to look at Frank Harris. And so 295.5 is his passing yards. I want to look at recent games and see kind of who he's played and how he's done. So his last two games have been really good. Now, Texas Southern, they're nobody. Middle Tennessee, not terrible, but 392 yards and 4 TDs, and then 414 yards last week against Middle Tennessee. Only had 222 against Texas, which that's a tough game, but then 359 and 337. So I like him to go over. He's been over in 4 of 5 games, with the one being on the road at Texas. He went under, and his last 2 games, he's averaging 400 yards per game, and this game has a total of 73. So I like him to go over 295.5. So that is kind of how I start looking at stuff and dig in. No one has time to look at all these players, but you kind of start to get to know the players as you do this more and more. So I try to find 10 a week, and I look into those players. I look at the game logs, and then the next week I do a different 10, and then eventually by week 4, you've got 40 people under your belt that you're kind of familiar with and that you know. So Frank Harris over 295.5. And then when we flip over here to rush yards, you can see there's not a lot of differences over here. There was one here with Maryland, Purdue. It's 20 yards. Bigsby, but he's going up against Georgia. And these little poppets over here, these are what I look at first. Now, the one that jumps out that's the highest on the slate is Adrian Martinez for Kansas State against Iowa State. Close game, 1.5, total only 45. He's averaging 93.8 rush yards a game. His line's only 55, so that's someone that we want to take a look at. So we're going to go over here and we're going to say Adrian Martinez. All right, so we're looking at his rush yards, and his line was 55.5 on Prize Picks. And his rushing, his first game, he had Well, one thing that jumps out at me is the attempts. I love 13, 13, 13, and 12, and then 21. So he's running 12 plus times a game. So he's getting a lot of attempts in there. So he had 39 the first game, 52 the second game, 59 against Tulane. So a couple games he started getting about 50 a game. So that's kind of right where they're projecting him. But then against Oklahoma, he ran for 148 yards and 4 touchdowns. And then against Texas Tech last week, he ran for 171 yards and 3 touchdowns. So that's kind of what he's averaging, that 55.5 number. But the last 2 games, look at that. That's over 300 yards and 7 touchdowns on the ground. So I'm going to take a shot at him against Iowa State in a good game. Jalen Daniels ran for about 45, 50 yards last week against Iowa State. So that's a fair number, but I like that to go over just because he's pretty much tripling it in his last 2 games. So that's one that jumps out at me. And then I didn't look at these. Chase Brown, he's one of the top rushers in the NCAA, but he's going up against Iowa, who plays slow, really good defense, and his line's 111. So that's kind of steep. Trayshawn Ward, I looked at him, but kind of moved him down the list. He wasn't someone that jumped out at me. But again, look through this sheet, find the players. You guys can probably find a lot more than I can. I'm kind of limited on time with everything that's going on. So flipping over to receiving yards, we are going to take a look. Let's see, flip these. We have a lot of 20s that are over 20 receiving yards. Emeka, however you say his name, he's someone that I'm always on. He's averaging over 100 a game. His is 79.5. He was under it last week. He didn't make the list of my final 4. But flipping down here, looking at some of these, one that jumped out was Green. So he's someone you could go take a look at. 104.5 yards, but I looked him up. He only had 2 games, 1 over, 1 under, so not a lot of stats. So the average is kind of skewed. Over here, a couple overs. And let me find. So Robinson was the first guy that jumped out at me. And let me see if here he is. So Robinson for Texas going up against Oklahoma. They're favored by 9, so should be good game script. Over under is 65.5. That's good. He's averaging 37.6 receiving yards per game, and his number is only 15.5. So we have a difference of 22 yards. So he's averaging 22 more yards than his price pick line for receiving yards. And then his projection right here is 38.4. So he's projected right about what he's averaging, but yet the price pick line is about half. So that's someone I'd want to go take a look at. So let's take a look at him. BIJ. All right, so we're going to look at his receiving yards. Receiving. So he doesn't get a lot of receptions, so that's the first thing that comes out. 3, 3, 1, 1, 2. But usually when he gets one, he's, getting some good distance on it. So this could be a one-catch winner. He could catch a ball in the first quarter, go for 17, and then be done, and you're good to go. But he's 5-0 that number, so 40, 73, 19, 22, and 34 receiving yards. He hasn't had a game through the last 5 weeks that he's been under 15.5. So he's 5-0 for an over there. So I like him to go over 15.5 receiving yards. And then the other guy we had, let me find him. Man, there's so many players, it kind of hurts your eyes looking down at all these. This dude, Rome Odunze for Washington. So I love Penix. That dude is an absolute monster. They're favored 14 with a total of 57, so not great, but he is the wide receiver 1 for Penix. He's averaging 102.3 yards a game, and his total is only 73. He's projected at only 63, but again, I don't look at projections. I compare it to his per-game average. So he's going over this by almost 30 yards a game, so that's someone that we want to take a look at. So this is the 4th player that I'm going to go with on my prize pick card. Rome Odunze. So we're going to take a look at him. So right here we can see he caught 6 passes for 116 yards and 2 touchdowns last week in the loss to UCLA. He has 84, only had 48, and then the last 2 weeks, look at this, 8 grabs in each game, 161 yards against Stanford, 116 against UCLA. So in the last 2 games, he has 16 grabs, 377 receiving yards, and 3 touchdowns. That's phenomenal. And I love the targets, 10, 7, 9, 10. So they're looking at him a lot. He's the wide receiver 1 for Michael Penix. So we like that. The number's low enough that even in a blowout, he should be able to catch a couple balls and get over that number. So I like him to go over. So just to recap, the 4 plays I like are Frank Harris over 295.5 passing yards, Adrian Martinez over 55.5 rushing yards, Robinson for Texas, running back, over 15.5 receiving yards, and then Rome Odunze over 73.5 receiving yards. So those are the 4 that I like, and I'm going to leave it up to you guys to find a 5th one to put in there. So good luck, have some fun.